I've been making this quilt for about a year, and I suspect I'm not even halfway done. So about a year ago, I heard about EPP, or English paper piecing, and I decided that I wanted to give it a try. I actually made a whole video where I talked about EPP and kind of how to do it, and I made a whole project bag using the technique. So you can go and check that out if you want to. But essentially, EPP is a traditional hand sewing technique used for quilting where you wrap fabric around different shapes of paper to baste it down to that shape, and then you sew the shapes to each other, and then you use that to create different designs and patterns and different effects and stuff. There's a lot of variety of things you can do with this technique, and it's really fun if you like slow kind of hand sewing. The other really cool thing about EPP is that it's a great technique to use up your scraps. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you'll remember that I spent most of last year trying to dwindle my stash and really get it under control, and part of that was also figuring out ways to use my scraps. So this was actually one of the ways that I found to do that. My design idea was to make kind of like a flower pattern, sort of like this one. This was my main inspiration photo, I would say. And because this is such a slow process, I still haven't really thought about how I'm going to finish the outside or what I'm going to do when I get to the edges. But I think I still have plenty of time to make that decision. Like I just said, making a quilt by hand is a very slow process, which I did know from the start, and I think that's especially true when you're not really working on it every day. My approach to this project has been to enjoy the process, so I'll work on it in the evenings or weekends when I'm up for it, or I have no other project going. But I don't really feel guilty about not working on it for like weeks at a time if that's the case. When I'm working on a knitting project, or I just don't feel like working on this. It's been a really interesting project for me because I tend to hyper focus on the projects that I'm doing, and I always want to finish them as soon as possible. Something I do really often is I'll work on this project when I'm procrastinating other stuff. So if I get to a particularly difficult part of a knitting project, or I'm just not in the mood for thinking, I just want to do something with my hands, but I don't really want to have to be thinking about anything, I will work on this project. So it's definitely something I'm working on with no deadline, with no rush. I'm just working on it when I feel like it, and trying not to feel guilty about that. started planning out the quilt, I had a lot of white and blue fabrics. So I thought the whole quilt was going to be white and blue. Obviously, I ran out of white, and I also have a dwindling supply of blue shades of fabric in my stash. In my defense, I had never made a quilt before, so I didn't really have a concept of how much fabric I need to do one. Like, I knew that it was going to be like 2 meters or whatever, but it's kind of different to see like 2 meters of fabric rolled out and to look at your scraps and kind of conceptualize that it's going to be like how much that's going to translate into, if that makes sense. However, now I am committed to the white background, so that can't change. And I have had to buy some plain white cotton. I have since decided to mix in other colors. And while I am trying not to worry too much about placement, I am still trying to mix in the blue, even if I'm adding other colors. So maybe the center of the flower is blue, and then the rest is a different color, or maybe I'll have blue petals with a center that's a brighter color, and kind of mix and match that way with the intention of keeping the palette cohesive throughout the quilt. I think because I have the white borders, it does mean that the colors are never really touching each other, so it creates like an illusion of space and means that I don't have to worry as much about like clashing colors together or patterns together, but still I'm trying to keep like a cohesive theme throughout the whole quilt. So I am keeping to like blues. Now I've added greens and I've started adding pinks and oranges. It has been really cool to see the quilt grow, and it's really nice to know that it was all done by hand. You know, it's like really rewarding to know that every single piece of fabric was stitched by hand by me. That's probably the coolest aspect of this quilt so far for me, or this project so far for me. And I do find myself sometimes just sitting and like admiring it, because I'm like, wow, I have been like every single stitch was done by my hand. So I think that kind of slowing the process down has been really interesting to me and has been really eye-opening to me, and I totally get why people do full-on hand-sewn projects just for the fun of it. When you're doing something like that, you're not thinking about the end result. You're thinking about the journey, and you're trying to enjoy the journey. So my process currently is to make the center flower. Hey buddy. Then I add a white border to it, like these ones, and then I add it to the quilt itself. Due to the shapes of the hexagons, it does mean that I have to add extra hexagons once I've sewn the white borders to each other to fill in the gaps. Usually I'm filling in the gaps with colored hexagons using the same fabrics that I'm using for the whole quilt, but sometimes it does need to be a white hexagon just to kind of space things out. I don't have a pattern per se. I just lay the quilt down, add one of these flowers to a next spot, and then see if that leaves gaps behind. And if it does, I add whatever makes sense to add there. I'll add the colored hexagons to certain places to kind of continue the illusion of the flowers. And then to other places, I'll add the white ones to space out the colored ones. So it's really just like I kind of figure it out as I go. So far, I've been adding them around each other willy-nilly because, quilts are really big and I was nowhere near needing to worry about sizing. But I do think I'm getting to a size now where I need to just measure it so I don't go overboard with making it too wide or too long, and I can kind of keep things within the sizing that I want, because I want to avoid like cutting off fabric as much as possible, because obviously it's a long, slow process to sew all of these to each other by hand. So I don't want to be like making hexagons that I'm going to cut off. I'll probably have to shave off like little pieces to kind of make it a rectangle at the end. But for the most part, I want to avoid like cutting out big chunks. So let us measure. You think you can move so I can measure? Excuse me. Excuse me. Oh, you such a grumpy boy. You need to move now. Oh, thanks. I'm thinking of making the quilt 2 meters by 2 meter 20. Right now, we are measuring about 130 by 170. I still need to grow it in both directions, but it's good to know that I'm kind of getting to the ballpark, or like getting closer to the ballpark, I guess. So I'm really measuring the furthest point of all of them, of all of the sides, and that's what gave me those dimensions. So I do still need to like fill out the space. There's still probably a year left before I finish this project. I think I still have a lot of ground to cover with the actual like top layer of the quilt, and then I'll still have to add the batting and the like lining or like underside fabric. I don't know what that's called. I'm not a quilter, obviously. And then actually do the quilting. I would say probably at least a year, if not more, till I finish this project. Like I'll have months where I work on it pretty much every day for like an hour or two, and then I'll have months where I don't touch this project. And I don't want to rush. I don't want to have a deadline. I think probably another year is a reasonable estimate at how long it'll take me to finish this. I started this quilt at the start of June of 2024, and it's now the start of June 2025. So I thought it would be nice to do like 1 year update of where I'm at with this, and to just kind of share the process with you a little bit. And since my sewing machine pedal is still not here, I hope it gets here this week, but it's still not here right now. But yeah, this is a project that I've mentioned here and there in videos throughout the year, so I thought some of you might be interested in like seeing it. I think in the end it'll be a really rewarding project when it's all like splayed out on a bed, you know, and I can pass it on to my future offspring or like family members or whatever. That's it for me for today. If you've made it this far, I think you should subscribe to my channel. I post a new video most Fridays, and I also post a lot of short form content both on here and on Instagram and TikTok. That's it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Why wait to cover this quilt with black hair? Why not cover it with hair now, you know?